let me be direct with you from the outset. What we witnessed on May 12, 2026 was not a routine satellite launch. It was not a symbolic demonstration of technological capability. What we witnessed was Iran fundamentally altering the balance of power in space-based intelligence gathering across the entire Middle East and Central Asia theater. I am looking at technical specifications from the QAM 100 launch vehicle that have been circulating among American aerospace analysts for the past 96 hours, and I need you to walk through this with me because what it achieved is not a communications satellite. It is not a weather monitoring system. It is not a single reconnaissance platform. What it placed into orbit is a networked constellation of 15 satellites operating in coordinated formation, and the implications of that coordination are what we need to understand right now. In the next 18 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why this launch represents the most significant shift in regional military intelligence since Israel deployed the OFEC series, why American Central Command's operational security has been fundamentally compromised, and why your understanding of Middle Eastern power dynamics needs to update immediately. This is geopolitical analysis that assumes you are paying attention. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is being actively analyzed by Pentagon Space Command, and most major news networks are getting the story completely wrong. Let's start with the mechanics of what actually happened, because the technical achievement here matters more than the political theater. On May 12th at 0447 local time, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Force launched a QAM 100 three-stage solid fuel rocket from the Shahrud Space Center in Semnan province. The QAM 100 is a domestically produced launch vehicle derived from the Ghadr ballistic missile system. It stands approximately 5 meters tall with a launch mass of roughly 52,000 kilograms. To put that in perspective, that is roughly one-third the size of a SpaceX Falcon 9, but the engineering achievement is not about matching Western launch capacity. It is about what Iran accomplished with significantly fewer resources. The payload consisted of 15 satellites deployed into low Earth orbit at an altitude between 450 and 550 kilometers. According to reporting by Space News and confirmed by multiple independent tracking stations, including the U.S. Space Force's 18th Space Defense Squadron, all 15 satellites achieved stable orbits within 47 minutes of launch. That deployment speed and precision is not accidental. Commander Hassan Salami of the IRGC Aerospace Force described the constellation as, and I am quoting him directly here, a persistent surveillance network capable of continuous monitoring of critical infrastructure, military installations, and maritime choke points across a 4,000-kilometer operational radius. The International Telecommunication Union Registry confirms that 12 of the 15 satellites are equipped with synthetic aperture radar and electro-optical imaging systems. The remaining 3 are communications relay satellites designed to maintain data links when ground stations are unavailable. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing you are not getting this level of analysis anywhere else. Now, let's talk about what Iran actually built and why American military planners are significantly more concerned than public statements suggest. Announcement number 1, the networked constellation architecture. And this one matters more than anything else because it solves the fundamental problem that has limited every previous Iranian space program. Traditional reconnaissance satellites operate independently. They pass over a target area once every 90 to 120 minutes, depending on orbital parameters. That means intelligence is episodic. You get a snapshot, you wait. You get another snapshot. Military commanders plan around those gaps. Convoys move during blackout windows. Aircraft reposition when satellites are over the horizon. Missile systems relocate between observation passes. The entire operational security model of American and Israeli forces in the region has been built around exploiting those gaps for the past 3 decades. Iran's new constellation does not have gaps. With 15 satellites in coordinated orbits, the system maintains continuous coverage of predetermined target zones. According to analysis published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the orbital spacing allows for overlapping coverage windows where at least 2 satellites have line of sight to any location within the surveillance envelope at any given time. Dr. Laura Grego, a senior scientist at the Union of Concerned Scientists, stated publicly that this configuration effectively eliminates the blackout windows that have previously allowed for unobserved military movement in the region. The satellites themselves are small. Each unit masses approximately 85 to 110 kilograms. Western defense analysts initially dismissed earlier Iranian satellite programs precisely because of their small size, assuming limited capability. That assumption was incorrect. Modern sensor miniaturization and AI-driven image processing have made small satellites increasingly capable. The synthetic aperture radar systems on these satellites can achieve ground resolution of approximately 1 to 3 meters. That is sufficient to identify vehicle types, count aircraft on a tarmac, monitor ships in port, and track the construction of military facilities in near real time. The electro-optical systems provide even higher resolution under favorable lighting conditions, with published specifications suggesting sub-meter resolution capability. Iran currently operates this constellation, in addition to the 6 reconnaissance satellites it launched previously between 2022 and 2025. That brings total Iranian space-based intelligence gathering assets to 21 operational satellites. That number matters because it represents a tenfold increase in Iran's persistent surveillance capability in just 48 months. Received. That is announcement number 1. Announcement number 2, the targets are already identified and the surveillance is already operational. This is the part the Pentagon has confirmed through official channels. Within 72 hours of achieving operational status, Iranian state media released imagery demonstrating active surveillance of 3 specific locations. First, Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, which hosts approximately 10,000 American military personnel and serves as the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command Air Forces. The imagery showed individual aircraft parked on the apron with sufficient resolution to identify aircraft type. Second, the Strait of Hormuz, where the satellite constellation is providing continuous maritime domain awareness. Every commercial vessel, every tanker, every warship transiting the strait is now being tracked in real time by Iranian space assets. The implications for American carrier strike groups operating in the Persian Gulf are significant. The element of surprise that has historically been a core component of American power projection has been substantially degraded. Third, and this one almost nobody in the mainstream media is discussing correctly, the Golan Heights and Israeli military installations in northern Israel. Imagery released by Iran showed clear views of Israeli Defense Force positions along the Syrian border. This represents the first time Iran has demonstrated space-based intelligence gathering capability over Israeli territory with sufficient resolution for tactical military planning. Think carefully about what this represents. For decades, Israel has maintained near-total intelligence dominance over Iran through a combination of satellite reconnaissance, signals intelligence, and human sources. That asymmetry has been a cornerstone of Israeli strategic planning. It is why Israel has been able to conduct targeted strikes against Iranian facilities with minimal warning. It is why Iranian nuclear scientists have been assassinated in Tehran. It is why weapons convoys in Syria have been destroyed before reaching Hezbollah. That intelligence advantage has not been eliminated, but it has been significantly reduced. The reason this matters is the same reason American submarine locations matter. When your adversary cannot see you, you have freedom of action. When your adversary can see you continuously, your options narrow. Every aircraft that takes off from an Israeli airbase is now potentially observable by Iranian satellites. Every convoy that moves toward the Lebanese border is trackable. Every deployment of Iron Dome batteries can be cataloged and analyzed. Stay with me because this is where the narrative completely changes and where the strategic implications become impossible to ignore. Announcement number 3, and this is the part that reveals the actual long-term strategy. This is not just about intelligence gathering. This is about Iran establishing itself as a regional space power with the capability to provide satellite services to allied nations and non-state actors. According to a joint statement released by Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Russian Federal Space Agency, Roscosmos, on May 14th, Iran and Russia have signed a memorandum of understanding for satellite data sharing. The agreement allows Russia to access Iranian satellite imagery of NATO military installations in Eastern Europe, particularly U.S. Army bases in Poland and Romania. In exchange, Russia is providing Iran with orbital tracking data, ground station support, and technical assistance in satellite operations. But it extends beyond Russia. Bloomberg reported on May 15th that Iran has offered satellite reconnaissance services to Syria, Iraq, and Yemen's Houthi-controlled territories. The commercial terms have not been disclosed, but defense analysts suggest Iran is providing limited intelligence feeds at subsidized rates or in exchange for political alignment. This is not charity. This is Iran building a client network dependent on Iranian space-based intelligence. If you operate a military or political organization in the Middle East and you want continuous satellite reconnaissance but cannot afford to launch your own constellation and you cannot rely on Western providers who will cut access the moment you conflict with American interests, Iran has just become your only option. That is not speculation. That is the strategic market Iran is deliberately creating. The launch cost for the entire 15-satellite constellation is estimated by Space News at approximately $180 to $220 million. For context, the United States spent $1 billion launching a single KH-11 reconnaissance satellite in 2023. Iran is achieving persistent regional surveillance coverage at roughly 1/6 the cost of a single American equivalent system. The asymmetry is extraordinary. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now let's talk about what is really happening behind the headlines because there are two stories playing out simultaneously, and the mainstream media is only covering one of them. The public story is about technological achievement. Iran launches satellites. Western commentators acknowledge the capability, but downplay the significance. Officials make reassuring statements about American space superiority. That narrative is not wrong, but it is incomplete. The private story, the one being discussed in classified briefings at Central Command and the Pentagon, is about operational security collapse. American military planning in the Middle East has been predicated on intelligence dominance for 35 years. Every strike package launched from carriers in the Gulf, every special operations mission staged out of Jordan, every logistics convoy moving supplies to Syrian Democratic forces. All of it has occurred with the assumption that American forces could observe adversary movements while remaining largely unobserved themselves. That assumption no longer holds. Think carefully about what this represents. When the United States bombed Iranian-backed militias in Iraq in February 2026, the strike packages flew from Al Udeid. The aircraft launched at night. They maintained radio silence. They flew low-altitude routes designed to avoid radar detection. And they struck targets that had been located through a combination of satellite reconnaissance and signals intelligence. That operational model assumes the adversary does not know the aircraft are coming until weapons are already in flight. Now imagine executing that same mission when Iranian satellites are watching Al Udeid continuously, when they can observe aircraft being loaded with munitions, when they can track the exact moment those aircraft taxi to the runway and take off. The tactical advantage of surprise is gone. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was asked about the Iranian satellite launch during a press conference on May 16th. His response was dismissive. He stated, and I am quoting the official transcript, "Iran's satellites do not change the fundamental balance of power. Israel maintains overwhelming military superiority." That statement is technically accurate and strategically misleading. Israel does maintain overwhelming military superiority in terms of aircraft, missile systems, and defensive capabilities. But intelligence is not about superiority. It is about information asymmetry. And that asymmetry just shifted measurably in Iran's favor. The United States responded through a State Department briefing on May 15th. Spokesperson Michael Harmon stated, "We are monitoring Iran's space activities closely. We retain full confidence in our ability to operate freely in the region." Notice what that statement does not say. It does not claim American operations are unaffected. It does not dispute Iranian surveillance capability. It expresses confidence, which is a rhetorical device, not an operational assessment. If you are an American service member stationed at a base in Qatar, Iraq, or Kuwait, what is happening 500 kilometers above your head is not a foreign policy abstraction. It is a force protection concern. If you are an Israeli pilot flying strike missions into Syria, Iranian satellites are not a political talking point. They are a tactical variable that changes mission planning. If you own a shipping company with tankers transiting the Strait of Hormuz, Iranian space-based maritime surveillance is not a geopolitical curiosity. It is an insurance risk calculation. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. During the Peloponnesian War, Athens and Sparta, the two dominant Greek powers, exhausted themselves in a 27-year conflict. Both sides spent enormous resources. Both sides suffered devastating losses. Both sides believed they were fighting for survival and dominance. And who won? Macedon. Philip II of Macedon watched the Greek city-states destroy each other, then walked in and conquered the entire region because the two main powers had depleted themselves fighting one another. The parallel here is not perfect, but the strategic dynamic is identical. The United States and Israel have been focused on Iran's nuclear program, Iran's missile development, Iran's proxy networks. Billions of dollars have been spent on intelligence gathering, sanctions enforcement, and military deterrence. And while that conflict has consumed attention and resources, Iran has quietly built a space-based intelligence network that fundamentally changes the operational environment. America is Athens. Israel is Sparta. Both are militarily superior to Iran in conventional terms. Both have focused on direct military threats. And Iran, playing the role of Macedon, has invested in an asymmetric capability that does not defeat American or Israeli forces directly, but degrades their ability to operate with the intelligence advantage they have relied upon for 3 decades. The historical lesson is this: the power that emerges strongest is often not the one that wins the most battles. It is the one that changes the rules of the battlefield while others are distracted fighting the last war. So where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 clear paths because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1, diplomatic containment. The United States and Israel work through international bodies, specifically the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, to establish restrictions on military reconnaissance satellites over sovereign territory. This would require cooperation from Russia and China, who both have veto power in the Security Council and both of whom benefit from any constraints on American intelligence dominance. The likelihood of this path succeeding is minimal. China and Russia have no incentive to limit Iranian capabilities that complicate American operations. The diplomatic route is a dead end. Path 2, technological counteraction. The United States accelerates development of satellite jamming systems, space-based interceptors, or ground-based anti-satellite weapons specifically designed to neutralize Iranian reconnaissance assets. This is the most likely American response. The U.S. Air Force Space Command has requested $7 billion in additional funding for counterspace operations in fiscal year 2027. That funding is not coincidental. It is a direct response to emerging adversary space capabilities, and Iran is now firmly in that category. However, any kinetic action against Iranian satellites, meaning physical destruction, creates immediate escalation risks. It would be interpreted as an act of war. It would generate debris fields that threaten other satellites in similar orbits. And it would establish a precedent that makes American satellites equally vulnerable to retaliation. The technology exists. The political will to use it is uncertain. Path 3, operational adaptation. American and Israeli military forces simply accept the new reality and adjust tactics accordingly. Bases increase camouflage and concealment measures. Aircraft are hidden in hardened shelters until immediately before launch. Decoy installations are constructed to waste Iranian analytical resources. Naval vessels operate under strict emissions control when in surveillance range. This is the path of least escalation and highest probability. It does not solve the problem, but it mitigates the damage. And it is precisely what military planners are working on right now in classified planning cells across the region. I think we are closest to Path 3 with selective elements of Path 2. The United States is not going to destroy Iranian satellites unless a direct conflict erupts, but it will invest heavily in degradation capabilities, jamming technologies, and counter-surveillance tactics. Israeli forces will adapt operational security procedures, and intelligence agencies will shift resources toward penetrating Iranian satellite operations, corrupting data feeds, or infiltrating ground control networks. The battlefield has moved to space, and the response will be asymmetric, patient, and largely invisible to public observation. Here are the questions I want you to take away. First, how does persistent satellite surveillance change the calculus for Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities? Second, what happens when Hezbollah, or the Houthis, gain access to Iranian satellite reconnaissance for coordinated attacks on Israeli or Saudi targets? Third, does space-based intelligence parity eliminate the possibility of surprise military action? And if so, does that make regional conflict more or less likely? Tell me in the comments what you think the most significant second-order effect of this launch will be. Tell me if you think American intelligence agencies are overstating or understating the threat. We will keep tracking every development in Iranian space operations, American counter-space strategy, and the shifting intelligence balance across the Middle East. That is what we do here every single day. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with everyone in your network who is trying to understand how the balance of power in the Middle East is changing in ways the headlines are not capturing. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next breakdown, and we will see you in the next analysis.